Inside versus outside. Clean it up, cover it up, shut it down, replant it. This time of year can be hard to know whether you're coming or going.
Honestly, though, you're all in the same boat, even though it's going to look different for each of us based on our zone, climate, and where we're growing, and how much energy we've got left.
More than our fair share of harvest pulled, and big bounties were the theme this summer. The garden definitely doesn't owe us anything, so going forward for many of us is gonna feel like a bonus. Still though, I got a lot left in the tank. Cold weather crops like this broccoli here are still being planted, and as far as indoors, it feels like I'm just getting started. We're not quite done yet. So, in case you missed it, here's Garden Quickies Volume 27, episodes 261 to 270. Enjoy. If we did everything right to start these guys, and they've been grown properly since, for the last month or so, it feels like it should be harvest time. Why then are my sweet yellow onions just sitting here, not being picked? Large, picture-perfect bulbs that look just like the ones in the store. Why then am I letting mine just sit here for no apparent reason? Hi, I'm Jeff from the Ripe Tomato Farms. Welcome back to another episode of the Garden Quickie, the show where in 2 minutes or less, we don't do anything without a good reason. And today's episode is all about picking your onions. Specifically, why not to harvest them too early, even if they've stopped growing and they look perfectly ripe to pick. Time short as it always is, so let's dive in. Onion plants are closely related to garlic. They look like garlic, they grow like garlic, and they can take a long time to harvest. Speaking of that harvest, the similarities don't end there, as we know that both garlic and onions are ready to pull out of the ground when the foliage starts to fail. Actually, there's two things that need to happen with the onion's foliage before we know they're ready to harvest. One, just like with our garlic, is that at least 50% of the foliage needs to have turned brown and died off. In addition, with our onions, the base of the foliage, known as the neck, needs to weaken, soften up, and bend over. This is known as breaking the necks. Okay, easy stuff, and that's great. But if the bulbs aren't going to get any bigger or better from now until then, why do we care? Why don't we just harvest them all right now and start enjoying them right away? Well, the answer to that comes down to storage. You see, onions are not actually a root crop. Instead, the bulbs are actually a set or collection of modified leaves. It's these leaves that form the layers of the onion, and more importantly, the layers of papery coating that protect them. Only when at least 2 or 3 of these layers have dried and fortified the outer walls are the onions ready to pick for long-term storage. Might not seem like a lot or even a big deal, but it could be the difference between your onions storing for 2 weeks versus 6 months. Takes a bit more time, sure, but it's gonna be worth the wait. And in the meantime, you can check out some more episodes of the Garden Quickie. There's no doubt that growing vegetables can be a lot of work. It can certainly take its toll, both on us as well as our gardens, particularly our soil. The top layers of our garden soil do much of the heavy lifting when it comes to being productive and actually growing vegetables. If we want to continually grow successive crops over and over in the same place, well, then we need to take special care. Hi, I'm Jeff from the Ripe Tomato Farms. Welcome to another episode of the Garden Quickie, the show where in 2 minutes or less, it's always all about the soil. And today's episode is all about it. Specifically, how to prep a bed immediately after a harvest to keep that soil protected, functioning, and healthy. Time's short though, as you know it is, so let's dive in. First off, not all crops cause imminent destruction whenever they're harvested. In fact, we can pick some of our most favorite fruits and vegetables without even touching the soil. All of our flowering and fruiting favorites are great because they leave the soil no worse for the wear. Others, though, like these onions here, it's complete chaos. Either way, the prep is still the same, and I always tackle this transition in 5 easy steps. The first of those is getting rid of all the old plants and debris. Now is the time to clean up the growing area as much as possible. Weeds, plants from the old crop, and any other bits and debris from the carnage of the harvest. Of course, we're still practicing no-till, so if any of the old crop is still standing, simply cut it down at the root collar instead of pulling it up. Okay, after all that, to finish off the cleaning, we want to go ahead and make the bed nice and level. Just like we would setting up a bed for the very first time, let's go ahead and create a nice level even surface to work with. Don't worry about that mulch if it's organic in nature, just incorporate it into those top layers of soil. Tamp it all down to finish it off, and the bed is starting to look plantable again. Easy stuff. Alright, even though we are no-till, it's still a good idea to aerate, especially in heavier or clay type soils. So for that, we're going to get out our fork and poke some holes. Probably not necessary for a brand new bed like this with loose soil, but it's not going to do any harm, and it's a good practice to get into. Make the holes as deep as you can and reset that fork every 6 inches or so. Again, easy stuff. It should only take you a couple of minutes. Now, this next task, however, is probably the most important one on this list, and that's to rehydrate the soil. Just as that soil profile needs air to function properly, it also needs water, probably even more so. Get some moisture back into that bed to keep the soil healthy and active. Dry, exposed soil is essentially dead and useless. Which brings us to our last task for post-harvest care, and a pivotal decision. We need to decide if we're planting another crop or if we're shutting it down for the year. The bed is no doubt ripe for planting, but only if you have enough growing days left in the season. If not, and you're shutting it down for the year, now is the time to cover and protect that soil until next spring. There's many ways to do it, and it shouldn't be complicated. The most important thing is just to cover it up. Which is great, because that's going to give us plenty of time to check out more episodes of the Garden Quickie. It's not just a clean slate and a blank canvas, it's also one of the most exciting times of the year to plant vegetables. Out with the old and in with the new. Fall planting. What a time to be gardening. Whether it's just a redo or a completely fresh start, planting at the end of summer has a laundry list of advantages that makes it a great time to cultivate. But that's only if we nail it and get it right. Hi, I'm Jeff from the Ripe Tomato Farms. Welcome back to another episode of the Garden Quickie, the show where in 2 minutes or less, we always make sure you get it right. And today's episode is all about fall planting. Specifically, 4 things to do to make sure that you get the most out of this late season gardening. Time's short though, as you know it is, so let's dive in. There's no doubt that fall gardening is a bit of a bonus, as it's seen as extra on top of all that summer bounty. It's great that we get to keep the garden going, even if plants like these tomatoes here are on their way out. But that leads us to our first tip, and that's crop choice. With spring planting, the world is our oyster, and the options seem unlimited. Fall gardening, while just as great, is much more defined, and not all plant choices are gonna be on the menu. We need to choose crops that have one of two characteristics. They either need to grow fast or they need to enjoy being harvested in the cooler weather. Some crops, like these peas here, do both. Which leads us to our second tip, timing. This one is much more important in the fall. Spring growing and planting can be quite forgiving, as the days are not only getting warmer, they're also getting progressively longer. This allows us to be more lax with our timing and more loose with our dates. Not so with fall planting. With winter looming and a finite amount of days to grow, we need to be smart with our timing or we risk getting nothing for our efforts. Of course, this timing is going to depend on crop choice as well as the zone you're growing in, but a good rule of thumb is to get your fall starters into the ground about 6 to 8 weeks before your first fall frost. Speaking of getting them into the ground, whether you're growing from starters, like these cauliflower here, or directly from seed, planting our plants at the right depth can always make a huge difference for our success. For plugs, seedlings, and starters, simply plant them to the existing root color. I know it can be tempting to plant them deep like we do with our tomatoes and peppers, but these guys just don't grow that way. For direct seeded crops like peas, spinach, and these radishes here, simply use the guidelines on the back of the seed packet for the best results. And lastly, just as the up and down is important to our success, even more so is the side to side. That's right, spacing. In the finite growing window that we have left, there simply isn't enough time to correct any spacing issues. Yes, the plants may look small and spindly now, but you know they're gonna grow like crazy and fill in any of the gaps. For the big fruiting brassicas like broccoli and cauliflower, you're gonna want to give them 1, maybe even 2 feet of space if you can afford it. With the right crop at the right depth and given enough space, fall planting can be smooth sailing. Which is awesome, because that's gonna leave us even more time to check out more episodes of the Garden Quickie. Vine ripen was the goal, and for sure we enjoyed our fair share. And because they're so tasty, we wish that the harvest could last forever. Winter is looming, however, and ripening our remaining tomatoes on the vine just isn't going to be an option for much longer. That's okay though, because tomatoes ripen quite readily even after they're picked. It's so easy, in fact, that we can even control the speed in which it happens. Tomatoes are the world's most popular backyard crop, for various reasons. They're definitely not a short one though, and fruit left on the vine to wither and waste away is sometimes a harsh reality. Fortunately though, we do have options. Hi, I'm Jeff from the Ripe Tomato Farms. Welcome back to another episode of the Garden Quickie, the show where in 2 minutes or less, ripening tomatoes is literally in our name. And today's episode is all about it. Specifically, how to ripen your tomatoes off the vine. Time's short though, as you know it is, so let's dive in. When it comes to picking tomatoes, harvesting them fully mature, fully ripe on the vine is always the best case scenario. This isn't always feasible, but even harvesting the ones with a slight blush works because these guys will mature quite quickly indoors. For the real green ones though, we need a different strategy. Years past, I'd suggest setting them on a windowsill, hoping that they would turn color. They usually do, eventually, but the method is crude and you're bound to lose one or more to rot. Refrigerators are also out of the question, as they'll ruin the taste of even the already ripened ones. The most reliable way to ripen your tomatoes off the vine is to confine them to an air-restricted space and then introduce a gas called ethylene. Commercial growers do this by the ton, but we can also do this at home a little more naturally. Simply place the green tomatoes that you want to ripen quickly in a paper bag or cardboard box, along with an already ripened tomato. If one's not available because all your tomatoes are green, an apple, banana, or even avocado is gonna work too. These fruits, when ripe, all naturally emit ethylene gas, and they'll ripen your tomatoes in days instead of weeks. And because we can selectively put our green tomatoes in these conditions, we can control the speed at which we ripen them. And with all that spare time we'll save, we can then watch even more episodes of the Garden Quickie. Winter is coming, and that means that our perennials need to be tucked in and protected. But it's not here yet, and with perennials like our strawberries, it's not something that we want to do too early. Strawberries are a perennial powerhouse that go dormant every winter, tucked in by layers of mulch and snow, only to sprout to life every spring. There's no doubt that it needs winter protection, just not quite yet. Hi, I'm Jeff from the Ripe Tomato Farms. Welcome to another episode of the Garden Quickie, the show where in 2 minutes or less, your strawberries are in good hands. And today's episode is all about them. Specifically, when is the right time to winterize our strawberry plants or patch? Time's short though, as you know it is, so let's dive in. Strawberry plants are grown in cold temperate climates because the plants need a winter chill and a winter dormancy to stimulate the flowering and fruiting process. Resting and going dormant is a normal part of the life cycle, and it's necessary to get the bounty we want. However, winterizing your strawberry plants too early can definitely lead to some poor results. Like most things with gardening, it all comes down to timing. Too early, and winterized strawberries can easily be tricked to break dormancy on a warm fall day. This messes with their internal timeline and cycle and will have the plant sprouting when winter is about to do its worst. The key to winterizing your strawberries is being patient and pushing through past the point of when you think you should do it. The time to winterize your strawberry containers and patch is when the plants have endured 3 to 4 hard frosts of -3 to 5 degrees Celsius. Pruning, cleaning up, and mulching your strawberry plants too early can cause rot, prevent proper hardening, and of course mess with those fruiting cycles like we just mentioned. Wait patiently for those hard frosts, prune off any dead or wilted foliage, and then apply a 2 to 6 inch thick layer of straw, pine, or leaves. Thicker mulches for colder zones and harsher winters, and thinner ones for zones 8 and above. Easy stuff. Almost as easy as getting out of this rain and checking out some more episodes of the Garden Quickie. If you've followed along for the last 6 years, you know that the end of summer isn't the end of the work. Nor is it the end of the growing. Fall gardening can definitely be exciting and fruitful, but only if we're ready for it. The days are shorter, colder, with more unpredictable weather, but we're not going to let that stop us this year. Hi, I'm Jeff from the Ripe Tomato Farms. Welcome back to another episode of the Garden Quickie, the show where in 2 minutes or less, we've got fall gardening down to a science. And today's episode is all about it. Specifically, 5 things we need to do now to be successful in our fall garden. Time's short though, as you know it is, so let's dive in. To be growing veggies in the wind, the rain, and the cold, you've really gotta love it. And we do, which is why we're here. But even if you don't, there's one fall task that's ubiquitous with all gardens, and that's the cleanup.
Old spent crops from the summer, like these tomatoes here, should be cut down right at the root collar, where the stem meets the soil. Try not to pull them up and rip them from the ground, as that does no good for our soil. Chop and drop the old stems and leaves if you're not planting a new crop, or compost them if you are. Easy stuff, and no matter what our plans are with our fall garden, this gets us started.
The removal of all of our fruiting success and now the spent crop aftermath really shows us just how much we take out of our garden. So, right now, before the ground freezes, is the perfect time to amend your soil.
Slow release amendments such as alfalfa meal, canola meal, rock phosphate, and rock dust get much needed nutrients back into our soils. This is going to be beneficial for not only our fall plants, but also our spring ones. Dark, rich, active compost falls into this category too. If you got it, now is the time to top dress your soil and incorporate it back into the garden.
And it's not just the nutrients. Our summer crops take a ton of moisture out of the soil. And if we're thinking of planting again for the fall, well, we've got to get that moisture back in right now.
This is especially true for our pots and containers and even our raised beds. Water the entire soil profile deeply and thoroughly to make sure that it's healthy and active.
Now, if we are planting for fall, we have to realize that not all crops are on the menu. We can't just go ahead and plant whatever we want.
It's not like spring, and we don't have an infinite window to grow. What we choose to plant now is going to be pivotal for our fall success. There's two types of plants we're after. Ones that either grow quickly seed to harvest, or crops that enjoy being picked when the weather is cooler. If we're lucky, we'll find plants that fall into both categories.
And just as crucial is the timing of getting those right plants into the ground at the right time.
Because of the impending doom of winter and the harshness that it brings, most plants, even the cold weather ones, need to be planted in the ground at least 4 to 6 weeks before your first fall frost. This one's non-negotiable, and it's the final key to our fall success. Trust me, it'll make the fall planting much more fruitful.
And once you've done all that planting, it just makes sense to sit back, relax, and check out some more episodes of the Garden Quickie.
It's that time of year again when we need to start thinking about getting our most important fall crop into the ground.
That's right, garlic. Yes, it's a long crop to grow, but it has a relatively short window to plant it viably.
Grown from the individual cloves of that season's harvest, hardneck garlic overwinters in the ground, creating an unseen epic network of roots, only to sprout up the following spring and then harvested that summer.
Hi, I'm Jeff from the Ripe Tomato Farms. Welcome back to another episode of the Garden Quickie, the show where in 2 minutes or less, we have garlic absolutely mastered.
And today's episode is all about it. Specifically, when is the right time to plant your hardneck garlic? That time, though, is in short supply, so let's dive in. As we mentioned, hardneck garlic is planted in the fall right before winter, lies dormant until the following spring, and then finally picked that summer.
We're focusing on hardneck garlic today, but there's actually 2 types of garlic that are grown around the world.
Hardneck, which is what we have here today, and softneck, which is reserved for warmer climates and doesn't need a winter dormancy to generate a bulb. Softneck types of garlic are much more flexible, and they can be pretty much planted year-round if the climate allows it.
Which brings us to our hardneck garlic, which has a much more defined set of needs and thus a much more defined schedule.
Planted about 2 inches deep, 4 to 6 inches apart, and in rows that are at least a foot apart. Get your garlic cloves into the ground 4 to 6 weeks before your first fall frost. That is the date on the calendar when that night has a greater than 50% chance of having frost. Mulch well, water heavily, and rest assured knowing that your garlic is tucked in, safe, ready to sprout this spring.
And while you're basking in the glory of your freshly planted garlic, feel free to check out some more episodes of the Garden Quickie.
In gardening, as in life, there are things that can be done and there are things that will be done.
But in the case of store-bought garlic, is it something that even should be done?
I've been growing hardneck garlic for just about 30 years, and it's the one crop that I can truly say that I've mastered with near 100% success every season. While store-bought garlic is not a hard no for me every time, it still doesn't get my recommendation.
Hi, I'm Jeff from the Ripe Tomato Farms. Welcome back to another episode of the Garden Quickie, the show where in 2 minutes or less, we're your garlic destination.
And today's episode is all about our favorite allium. More specifically, the pros and cons of growing garlic that we find at the grocery store. Should we or shouldn't we? Time short as you know it is, so let's dive in. Garlic, especially the hardneck kinds, is a long crop. And although it doesn't require a ton of effort to grow, losing a harvest after all that time, well, it really does sting.
Why then would we ever risk it? What's the benefit of growing from store-bought garlic? Well, there's two in fact. One, it's cheaper, significantly cheaper. And two, it's always available. But that's both a help as well as a hindrance.
Just because garlic is available to buy doesn't mean it's the right time to plant it. Garlic is a long crop, yes, but it has a relatively short window that you can plant it viably. And just as it may not be the right time to plant your garlic, the stuff in the grocery store might also not be the right type.
Which is why it's our first reason we don't do it. Garlic at the grocery store or supermarket is rarely sold by variety. It's garlic, and garlic is garlic. As far as the store is concerned, that's all you need to know.
When in fact, to be successful with this crop, you need to grow the right type for your area. Warm climates and those above zone 10 will have a tough time growing the hardneck types. And cooler climates like mine, well, we have a hard time with the softneck varieties.
After garlic is picked, it stores extremely well. This means that it can be sold out of season and shipped and sold to places where it shouldn't be grown.
The wrong variety doesn't even take into account those bulbs sprayed with growth inhibitors or the ones that are super chilled and super dried. All in the name of storage and shelf life.
Speaking of, some garlic you find at the store is so old that it's barely viable for consumption, let alone growing into a viable crop.
If you do insist on using store-bought garlic to grow, the best bet is locally grown and sourced bulbs that are fresh and in season, ideally mid to late summer. This way you know that the cloves are good, viable, and designed to perform well for your area. The beauty with garlic is that we only ever really need to buy it once, so we might as well get it right.
And after you do, make sure to check out some more episodes of the Garden Quickie.
With winter on the horizon, for many of us, the window to grow is shrinking fast.
Even for cool brassica crops like this cauliflower here, the time to plant may be now or never.
That timing, however, can be very confusing. Not only is it not the same for every plant or every variety, it's not even the same for every grower.
Hi, I'm Jeff from the Ripe Tomato Farms. Welcome to another episode of the Garden Quickie, the show where in 2 minutes or less, we're pretty crazy about cauliflowers.
And today's episode is all about them. Specifically, how long do they take to grow? Time short though, as you know it is, so let's dive in. Winter is a scary affair, even for plants that supposedly love the cool weather.
Our cauliflower is definitely on this list, so it just makes sense to know how long it takes to grow them. The answer to that, though, is that it depends.
The cauliflower life cycle is usually a range of 50 to upwards of 100 days, and 3 factors control the time it takes to get an epic harvest. Variety, of course the climate, and the way you plant it. Let's start with the planting method first.
Growing from a well-started plant is obviously going to take less time than growing directly from seed. But how much less?
Just the initial germination alone can take cauliflowers 1 to 2 weeks. So, seed houses suggest adding 3 to 4 weeks to your timeline if you're direct seeding.
Great, but what are we adding that number to? Well, that comes down to the variety, and that information is available on the back of every seed packet.
Unless otherwise stated, the number given on a seed packet is the number of days to harvest from a well-started seedling. So, if you're germinating your cauliflower seeds yourself or direct seeding them out in the garden, plan to add 20 to 30 days to that number.
And lastly, we have your climate and time of year. Weather and temperature are always going to have an effect on how fast a crop grows, and cauliflower is no exception.
Cauliflower grown in the warm days of spring or summer is going to mature far faster than that grown in the early spring or the late fall. Again, the seed packet and variety information can be a helpful guideline, but if your cauliflower isn't ready yet because of a cool late summer or a bitter fall, well, it is what it is, and you're just gonna have to be patient.
Patient, but not bored, because you can always check out more episodes of the Garden Quickie.
With the epic bulb harvest under our belts, we're reminded that nothing lasts forever.
Including those onions. They do, however, buy us a little bit more time than most crops.
Unlike our peppers, tomatoes, and especially our greens that have to be consumed soon after picking, onions have a storability like no other. The question is, just how long?
Hi, I'm Jeff from the Ripe Tomato Farms. Welcome back to another episode of the Garden Quickie, the show where in 2 minutes or less, your onions are in safe hands.
Because today's episode is all about them. More specifically, how long do our homegrown onions store for? Time short though, as you know it is, so let's dive in. Before being able to simply buy whenever we wanted, bulb onions were a crop that were designed to be harvested in the late summer, even into the early fall, and last us all the way until another harvest the following spring.
To do that, though, 3 things need to happen. We need to initially cure them properly, keep them away from any heat, and store them in a dry place with lots of airflow.
Curing takes place immediately after the harvest, just like with our garlic, and is simply the act of drying the outer 2 to 3 layers to form a protective sheath. Basically, the armor that will lock the moisture and flavor in and keep the bulbs firm and viable. After that, your onions need to be stored in a cool, dark place with a moderate amount of airflow. This is where the storage can go wrong, because heat and moisture are gonna do one of 2 things. It'll either rapidly decrease that shelf life or it'll cause the bulbs to sprout. Both things we're trying to avoid.
Once we've mastered the curing and storing techniques, the length of that storage viability all comes down to the variety we're growing.
Mild and sweet onions, often the white or purple ones, don't last long at all, sometimes as little as just a few weeks. Pungent, spicy, yellow bulbs are the ones that store the longest. With the right variety, they can store upwards of a year, right up until the time when we're harvesting our next batch. Again, keep your temperatures down, the moisture at a minimum, and the airflow moderate to max out the storage. Then, check out the variety that you're growing for the exact length of storage viability. But remember, this is for a best case scenario.
Just like it is with checking out more episodes of the Garden Quickie.
Thanks for watching, guys. And hey, if Garden Quickies are your thing, make sure to subscribe and click on this playlist here as we explore and solve more growing issues in 2 minutes or less.